also have on board members of the Fourth Estate. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to this session. And as usual, the ground rules remain. We will ask questions at the end of the session, but all, of course, we have interacted for a long time. If you don't have questions, not well thought through, you will not ask them. I mean, that's something we had already agreed over the period, so I'm not going to bother with that at all. So we are here today in keeping with President Julius Maada Bio's commitment to run an honest, transparent, and accountable administration. Right? You could all recall that part of our ministry's mandate is to ensure that we bridge the communications gap between citizens and government. And so, therefore, we are here to provide an opportunity for the Ministry of Internal Affairs, particularly the Sierra Leone Correctional Service, to give us an account of goings on at the Sierra Leone Correctional Service, particularly the incidents of 29th April this year. We do so because we believe that this is a public interest issue. Sierra Leoneans deserve to be briefed on what has happened, and in that regard, that is why you have the very top echelons of both the ministry and the Sierra Leone Correctional Service here today to give us an account. This means this government definitely respects the citizens. We will not ride roughshod over anybody. We will continue to keep this dialogue open. The Director General, the ministers have graciously consented with our support to respond to well thought through questions, so that at the end of the day, everybody leaves here well grounded on the key issues. And in the spirit of this, I now have the singular honor and privilege to call on the rostrum the Director General. Sorry, you hold it. The minister might come in to make statements after, right? Would you want to do it now or later? Okay. So I now have the pleasure to call on the Director General of the Sierra Leone Correctional Service to address the press and civil society here present. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister of Information and Communications, the Honorable Minister of Internal Affairs, Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs, Dr. Uis Korma, Consultant Senior Pathologist, Colonel Gauja, Team Lead to Technical and Security Support to the Sierra Leone Correctional Service, members of the Fourth Estate, members of civil society present, good morning, good afternoon. First, let me express my condolences to the family of our colleague, Hassan Kamara, who died in the line of duty on the 29th of April 2020. My sincere condolences also go to the families of all persons, officers and inmates who were injured or who died during the riots. We have called this press conference today to inform the public about the events of 29th April 2020. Perhaps if I fail to mention before I conclude this briefing, the question will arise, why now? And the answers to these are: one, at the time of the incident, that is 29 April, the consultant pathologist was ill, and he spent considerable period of time on that illness. And so thereafter, when he resumed duty, he had to carry out very professional and sensitive examination of persons who died during that day and the days after causes. So he had to do a post-mortem examination and professionally prepare a report. So that takes time. In addition to that, he is not only dealing with prison or the correctional facility incident. There are other cases that we are awaiting him, and so it takes time to really go through that thoroughly and present facts and figures. So that's one of the reasons why we are giving you the information only today. And also, investigations were launched into this incident. Investigations were conducted by the Office of the National Security and the Criminal Investigations Department. So if we are coming 2 months after the incident, that may be the reasons why it is so. I hope you understand. Let me now look at the causes of the incident of that day. We look at overcrowding. So the Freetown Main Correctional Center was built in 1914 with a capacity of 324 inmates. It is the country's only maximum correctional facility. Being the only facility in the country, it houses all categories of inmates, remand, trial, debtors, etc. It has charged with simple assault, traffic offenses, treason, murder, felony, robbery with aggravation, manslaughter, malicious damage, wounding with intent, arson, sexual penetration, rape, etc., etc. These are all in that one facility we call our maximum facility. At the time of the April 29th incident, there were 1,300 inmates in that facility. That constituted 400% of overcrowding. Mind you, I have mentioned that the facility was constructed to house only 324 at any given time. But on that day, we have 1,300. However, government is not oblivious of this overcrowding because government is poised to relocate that facility. I can factually tell you that 88 acres of land had been acquired already, and the officials of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Works, Ministry of Lands, and the Correctional Service have visited the site. Surveys have been done. Family members have given their consent so that the Pademba facility could be relocated in that area. And also, coming back to overcrowding, let me inform you that on that very day, hours to that period, inmates could have been released by His Excellency's amnesty prerogative of mercy. And we were to release 231 inmates that very day, the 29th of April. But that did not happen because of the riot. Staff shortages. Nationwide, the Sierra Leone Correctional Service is 40% under strength. Of 3,550 approved posts, 1,389 are not filled. Of the 2,161 officers currently employed, only 1,216 of them are disciplined officers. In other words, they do the day-to-day security job in the institutions. The implications are that we can only deploy many officers to inmates. And also, to give you further information, there were plans already underway to recruit 504 inmates because already government had provided funds for the recruitment of 504 inmates. But for the outbreak of the COVID in Sierra Leone, 504 officers could have now been in the training school undergoing recruitment training. But that did not materialize because of the outbreak of the COVID in Sierra Leone. We look at another cause or causative factor, which is the COVID-19 health restrictions and social media threats. After the admission of case 90 of COVID-19 at the Correctional Center, management took a number of preventive actions to avert community infection at the overcrowded correctional facility, that is the Freetown Mail. The actions were deemed consistent with health advisories from the Emergency Operations Center, and we therefore instituted the following measures. Emails were released in batches of 300 at a time for a period of 2 hours and 30 minutes rather than the normal 8 hours time allowance that was made for physical exercises, court attendance, sanitary requirements, and rehabilitation programs. Family visits were also suspended indefinitely. You know, the kind of impact that would create. But be that as it may, the UNDP had before now, because we thought about the kind of tension that would mount or that would be in the facilities if visits are not allowed. So UNDP had provided mobile phones, which was to be used at all correctional centers to enable inmates to communicate with their loved ones, their families. This was almost at the tail end of implementation. In fact, the approval for that implementation was just being awaited from the Ministry of Internal Affairs for approval so that we could roll this out to the inmates. But that did not materialize before the incident of April 29. Announcement teachings had been suspended for 1 month due to COVID-19 restrictions also created tremendous anxiety among inmates awaiting trial. Let me inform you, ladies and gentlemen, that since the imposition of these restrictions I have outlined, we had no other case of COVID-19 in that facility, where as of today, we have 1,400 inmates. There's no single case of COVID-19 in that facility, because I would categorically assert that because of these the restrictions that we imposed, that is why we have not experienced a single case. That single case which was detected in the facility was swiftly relocated elsewhere, where other primary contacts and himself are now undergoing treatment in a very safe area. The announcement by the Chief Justice that court sittings had been suspended for 1 month due to COVID-19 restrictions also created, of course, I have mentioned this. The talk shop was closed after persistent social media threats that plans were underway to poison a trial inmate. Those of you that frequent the social media, there are all sorts of social media posts going around for trial inmates or alleged trial inmates that were housed in that facility. But we had to contend with all of this because we don't have absolute control over social media posts. Pervasive social media posts and intelligence of the national intelligence community indicated that specific threats that inmates and persons unknown were planning a large-scale arson attack on the main correctional facility in order to facilitate the escape of inmates. That was pervasive, of course, in social media among the intelligence community. So in that regard, a high-level security assessment was undertaken on the 21st April 2020, and specific recommendations were made to enhance surveillance and strengthen perimeter defenses. The recommendations were submitted as instructed on Monday, the 27th of April 2019, by the Office of the National Security for executive clearance, so that all the recommendations that emanated from that meeting were to be employed. Of course, let me just mention a few of the items that the recommendations were to install a CCTV camera, an alarm system, an automatic standby generator. Well, we have to electrify the perimeter fence. Body and property scanners were to be installed. Motorola communication sets were to be given out to officers. All of these were to be implemented after that security assessment. But on the 27th, when the submission was made for executive clearance, the image struck on the 29th of April, unfortunately. Let's look at the riots now. So the riot started without warning around 7:30 a.m. on the 29th April 2020. It was eventually resolved around 11 a.m. on the same day, and therefore the riot lasted approximately 3 hours 30 minutes. Investigations indicate that key initiators of the riot broke through the chicken wire mesh across the gangway at the Wilberforce block. the damage workshop does and use heavy tools to damage the locks of cells. The overwhelming numbers of rampaging inmates quickly overwhelmed the 28 unarmed staff, seized hostages, violently smashed doors, and set stores and other buildings on fire. There was no clear leadership among the rioters. There were no lines of communication with the rioters, and so no demands were communicated. No ultimatums were presented to staff before or during this onslaught. So there was no alternate line of action, and a general group resolution was most unlikely. The actions of the violent and rampaging inmates could only be interpreted for what they were. That is, they were beating colleague inmates, bludgeoning and stabbing fellow prisoners to death with blunt objects. Mind you, there are rival groups or gangs within all correctional facilities. In our own case, we have these clique boys. They are factions. They are rivals. So I think that was an opportunity for them to wreak havoc on their rivals within that facility. So you find out that most of the post-mortem results, or the good number of the examination results, indicate that inmates died of blunt force injuries. I hope we all understand what that means. Pelting, beating, bludgeoning, and fellow prisoners or inmates to death with blunt objects, holding correctional officers hostage, pelting rocks and other offensive missiles at security officers inside and outside the perimeter, burning down large sections of the correctional center, violently preventing the National Fire Force from entering the yard to put out the fires, attempting to force their escape through the main exit and by scaling the perimeter walls. These were some of the acts that were perpetrated during the course of that day. After the whole situation has calmed down, the damage assessment was done, and all the buildings, like the chief officers' common room, the stores, the catering section, the hospital, the store, all of these were set alight. And after the assessment, up to 12 billion, as per the information given out by the Ministry of Works, when they have completed their BOQ and drains, it cost up to 12 billion. And other items, store items, for instance, office equipment, freezers from the catering, other related equipments from the carpentry shops and other workshops, also amounted to 7.5 billion. So we are talking to close to 20 billion, or 19.7 or 19.5 billion thereabout. Those are the losses, the damage that we incurred as a result of that incident. So now we look at the use of force. Still looking at the riot. As already indicated, 28 officers on duty inside the correctional facilities were unarmed. An outer security cordon, that is beyond the wall, the outer walls, comprised of a combined team of Armed Operations Security Department, that is the OSC, and soldiers of Republic of Sierra Leone Armed Forces, ASLAF. The use of force guidelines in the correctional facilities. Let me ask for a little of your time just to go through what section 16 of the Correctional Service Act of 2014 says about the use of force. Please bear with me a little bit. Section 16 says, a corrections officer may use such force against an inmate as is reasonably necessary in order to make the inmate obey lawful orders. That is section 16, subsection 1, and subsection 2 says, subject to this section, a corrections officer may use a weapon against a inmate who is escaping or attempting to escape and refuses when called upon to return, engage in a combined outbreak, or in an attempt to force, break open, or scale the outside door, gate, fence, or enclosure wall of a correctional center, or using violence on him or another corrections officer or another inmate or other person, unquote, from the section 16 of the Correctional Act. I'm just trying to tell you that you have the leeway or the leverage to use force if you must. And this is the citation that empowers the correctional service. Copies could be made available to whosoever because we can. We printed this through the support of the UNDP. We can make excerpts of it and make it available. Yeah. However, officers can use letter force. Of course, this is just to justify what I've just read out. So I go forward. We look at now the attempts to resolve the riot. Inmates refuse to yield to others to disperse and return to their cells. What used to obtain is that in issues or times where there are grievances among inmates, they have a means to seek redress. That is why we have among the inmate population, there are key opinion leaders or respected inmates among themselves who we appoint to arbitrate or to seek redress if there is need between the administration and the inmates themselves. For instance, we have people we call house captains. These are in charge of, like, for instance, we have the Blinding Block, Wilberforce, Clarkson, Blinding, all of these. We have house captain for Blinding Block, Wilberforce, Howard, and Clarkson. All of these have house captains. In addition to this, we have red bands. These are other operatives within the blocks that relate to their colleague inmates on a daily basis, much more than some of the officers do, because they are always among themselves, they are all present among themselves. We also have yard provosts. We have people, trusted inmates who are appointed, who serve in capacity as yard provost. These are all people that they could channel their communication through. But that day, under reference, the 29th, none of these were nowhere to be seen. The place was very chaotic. Once they broke out, there was no, like I have mentioned, no communication channel. They were not interested. I'm sure they were not interested in communicating any grievance that day. Everybody went on the rampage. So it was difficult to actually establish a proper channel of communication, whether for mediation or any or any other grievance that they had felt at that time. So the OSD personnel manning the security outside the perimeter wall initially fired tear gas canisters in an attempt to stop the rioting inmates from pelting stones within and outside the perimeter wall. As they pursued officers who were held within the main yard. That action did not stop the rioting inmates. So even the tear gas canisters that were sent in as warning, they did not heed to that. Inmates instead set ablaze some of the buildings within the compound. The workshop, for instance, the hospital, the store, the catering section, the reception, the chief officer's common room, to be precise. Excuse me. At the same time, some of the inmates started scaling the perimeter wall to make good their escape. For the next 2 hours, there was complex and sustained violence by the rioters that endangered the lives of other inmates, correctional officers, and the lives of citizens living close to the correctional facility, Pademba Road area, where the facility is located, to be precise. To be clear, all over the world, the prison riot is classified as a public emergency. When negotiations are impossible, the violence does not subside, and that violence involves the bludgeoning of persons to death, violent arson and pillage, and violent attacks on security forces. The only option regrettably left to restore law and order is lethal force, that which I have cited in the Act. The rapid escalation of violence, or the rapid escalation in violence, and unclear intelligence about the movements and intentions of the rioters meant that it was impossible to coordinate the swift entry into the main yard of armed OSD personnel who were manning the outer cordon of the facility. They had blockaded everywhere. Their presence were now everywhere, and officers were still being held hostage and tortured as I speak as at that time. Eventually, armed personnel made a forced entry into the main yard of the facility to restore law and order. They were violently attacked by the inmates with their lives at great risk. They had no option but to use lethal force in response. The aftermath of the incident. Sorry. Post-mortem examination. So, thank you. I'm talking about the aftermath of the incident now. Post-mortem examination reports indicate that 9 inmates and 1 officer were brought down as a result of their actions. Not our officer, who regrettably lost his life, but 9 of the men who were intransigent, could not heed to call, fell down on that day. That is the 29th of April 2019. And 21 other inmates succumbed to their injuries on various dates between the 30th of April and the 15th of May 2020. Of the inmates who died, 2 died of illnesses, 1 of asthmatic crisis condition and the other of tuberculosis. 12 inmates died of gunshot wounds, and 16 inmates died of blunt force injuries, which I have mentioned and have attempted to explain a little what that meant. 6 of these have already been buried after the post-mortem examination by their relatives who came forward to reclaim the bodies. And the 24 are yet to be buried because we have sent out letters informing them that their relatives who choose them as next of kin, who had been with us, had died as a result of their incident, but none has turned up to claim the bodies. And if that remains the case until Sunday of next week, the department will endeavor to give them a decent burial the way we used to do. So the 24 corpses are still at the mortuary hospital, waiting for identification and for claiming by their next of kin. And I have mentioned that we have we are communicated with all of them. Some have declared their intention that they are not interested, that we should go ahead and give them burial. So that is the case for the 24 inmates that we still have at the mortuary. 32 inmates were injured during that incident. All of them have recovered from their injuries except 4. 3 of whom are at Connaught Hospital and the 1 at emergency hospital. Otherwise, all others have recovered from their illnesses, and it is government that actually took responsibilities to make sure that they receive treatment. Perhaps in 1 or 2 cases, 1 or 2 families came to support government effort in helping out with some medication, but that is not strange. It's usual. Sometimes when we have specialized drugs which are not available in a pharmacy, the parents, sometimes parents or relatives will come in to endeavor to provide. So it's not new in this case. Of course, 32 officers also sustained injuries, all of them with the support of our welfare fund. From our welfare fund, the Silent Correctional Service Welfare Fund, we also provided medication, and fortunately all of them have now fully recovered and they have resumed duty. Moving forward, that is what we take away from this incident. Administrative and diplomatic guidelines on resolving riots did not work because the rioters did not have a clear leadership, and the scope of violence and brutality of the riot itself was not clearly anticipated. Guidelines on isolation and containing riots before they start did not work. Orders to the inmates to disperse and return to their cells were not heeded. Less lethal force, use of force in the form of tear gas was violently resisted. Fire force officers were violently attacked. The riot was marked by complex, heightened, and widespread criminal violence that posed a real threat to the life of others, other inmates, the lives of residents around the correctional facility, and the lives of correctional officers and security forces manning the facility at that time. Rioters ignored all warnings from security forces to disperse and stand down before offensive actions started. Moving forward, there is a need to establish a riot command post and provide equipment and training for officers. There also needs to be a clear planning, drills, and lines of authority and command during riots. For now, police and other security forces have been finalizing investigations. Damage assessments have been done and reconstruction and repairs have already commenced. We are working to provide a psychosocial support to all persons affected by the event. A comprehensive report on the incident will help policymakers, the judiciary, law enforcement, corrections facility staff, civil society, and the public, so we can develop a progressive long-term reform agenda. This is consistent with His Excellency's call on the 8th of May 2020. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
DG, thank you so very much for that cinematic account. Pretty comprehensive, quite insightful of the events that unraveled on that fateful 29th date. So I will lead the discussions going forward. There are quite a couple of things that come to mind. This is not the very first time government is breaking silence on this matter. In fact, we had a running commentary while the incident was evolving. Myself, team, and everybody else was there to give citizens an update of what was happening. Lest it be misunderstood that we are only talking to citizens 2 months on. This is just a more comprehensive version after the calm than we gave at the time. The other bit I like to note is that government clearly realizes that we have overstretched the capacity of the current correctional center at Pademba Road, and therefore real and practical steps are being taken to relocate the prisons, funding being available. Already a reasonable acres of land has been acquired for this relocation, and all other processes are ongoing, Title Ds and all of that. You also note that government is not oblivious of the fact that the current capacity is stretched. So recently approval was given for additional correctional officers to be recruited. They cannot now proceed on training courtesy of COVID, where we have to respect social distancing, limitations on congregations and related issues. Also, just to ensure that this government is committed to ensuring that the rights of inmates are respected at all times, mobile phones are now available so that inmates could stay in touch with their families. I think this is a very fundamental right that inmates continue to enjoy, and that has to be noted. Again, you know, Pademba Road was built back in the days, right? Times have changed, we have moved on. We realize there are a lot of things that are required right now in the 21st century in the digital environment. We are talking about installation of CCTV cameras and a whole suite of other security equipment to ensure that we are able to keep it in the true spirit of its name, maximum security correctional center. We note that in the aftermath of this, like the DG mentioned, valuable Sierra Leonean lives were lost. To those families, we extend our deepest condolences. Efforts have been made by government to ensure that those who were hospitalized get top-notch treatment. In some instances, we had family members supporting, complementing government's efforts, especially when it came to specialized drugs. To those families, we are thankful. So let us also use this opportunity to re-echo the fact that we still have 24 corpses at the mortuary, awaiting claimants. So, I mean, as a responsible government, we believe that is, families should be accorded that right, yeah, to see how they could send their loved ones off in style. But in the event that we can't have families coming forward, claimants coming forward, it is also government's responsibility to ensure that they get a dignified burial, and that will be done in adherence to all existing protocols and standing orders. So on that note, I'd now like to take this opportunity to open the Q&A session. I'm manning this one for very obvious reasons. These are COVID times. The initial thing was that we will not go beyond an hour. But in the greater interest of accountability and transparency, we will stretch it a little bit. But let me caution, like at all times, let us think through our questions before we ask them. We will not have a lot of appetite for questions that are not well thought through. So, but I know this, I see the kind of men and women I see in the room gives me a lot of confidence. The right questions will be asked, for which we really require clarifications. Thank you very much, Mr. Director General, for that very cinematic and comprehensive account of that what happened at the Pademba Road Correctional Center on that fateful day. We are old school. Those of us who are old school will still keep calling it Pademba Road Prison. The much younger generation will grow up with Correctional Center, which is what the real issue is. So Q&A session, questions are. Mamadi the Deputy Minister will help me moderate this session, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Minister. So yes, once you're asked to ask your question, please indicate the media house you represent and your name. So we'll start with the man on the right.
Mohammed Kone is the name, and I write for Standard Times newspaper. Mr. Director, sir, just a couple of questions. What was the rationale behind closing the tuck shop within prison facilities? And also, I understand that you had one at a security meeting 2 days ago before the attempted prison break. There was going to be attempted prison break and acid. What took you so long to put measures in place to forestall all of what happened?
All right, thank you, Connie. I'll just limit it to two. So let me just encourage those of you who want to ask questions, please ask one question so we can make room for more people to ask questions. Yes, sir.
Besides, I write for Congo Times. DJ, on the day of the incident, what was the command structure like? Were you in control? Or
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Some you spoke about replacement or replacing the correctional service from the capital city to Somalia. Instead of replacing land.
Okay, so we'll take one more and then we get the DG to respond, and then we'll take some more for the second round. Yes, Mr. Ab. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Mr. DG.
Yes.
Can we get him the microphone?
Thank you very much.
Press it.
Thank you very much for those questions. To start with,
Rationale for the closure of the talk shop.
why we closed Talk Shop. The Talk Shop was not closed everywhere. It was just closed at the Pademba facility at that time because, like I've mentioned, rumors were rife on social media posts indicate that alleged treason trial image was about to be poisoned, and this Talk Shop was made available to inmates, those who can afford, those whose relatives or friends or loved ones will bring in some money for them, and these monies are kept by the officer in charge, and we have the welfare officer who from time to time will take part of that money for which the inmates will sign and buy whatever they need from the talk shop. But since rumor or social media post was right that inmates, one inmate or some treason, alleged treason trial inmates plans were underway to poison them, we had to close the workshop because one day when the inmates returned from court, when these treason trial inmates returned from court, somebody offered a particular inmate a bottle of water. And the man said, no, I have not asked you to provide any water for me. So that brought some suspicion to us, saying, perhaps this social media post, there may be some element of truth in it. So instead of leaving the talk shop open to everybody to come and buy and go, let us impose some restrictions on the talk shop. So in other words, it was to avert that social media post or whatever other intelligence that was permeating that's the reason, that's the main reason why that talk shop was closed on that day. And the other question says, we had a warning 2 days about this threat. If you listen well, I did mention that the national intelligence community had intelligence. There are also posts in social media that fire was going to be set in that facility to facilitate the escape of this inmate, this trial inmate. All of that was brought to the attention of the very high security personnel in this country, for which a meeting was held and a subsequent visit made to that facility to look at what the security structure was like at that time. And thereafter that meeting, all these recommendations, like I mentioned, were to install a CCTV camera, alarm system, automatic standby generator, electrify the top of the perimeter wall, Motorola phones, body art scanner, property scanner, all of these were to be placed in order to heighten the security as a result of the information. But the items that were identified as urgent security measures, the communication went between the Office of National Security and State House for Executive Clearance on the 27th, that is on Monday, and the image struck on the 29th. So there couldn't have been much time for us within 2 days after coming to these conclusions or these recommendations to have instituted all of those measures within 2 days. So that's why it happened the way it did. But as I have mentioned already, some of the security items are now being installed in that facility. Like for instance, the alarm system will be installed and all. So coming back to the command structure, like I have said, there was military, there was police, manning outside. And on the day of the incident, in fact, the OSD personnel fired into the main correctional facility, tear gas canister just to keep them at bay. Probably thinking that they were going to, provide a channel of communication between the inmates and us, the officers, the administrators. But that did not happen. So, because that did not happen, and this was a combined, it was a national security event at that particular point, where we have all the fire force, the military, the corrections officers, the police, all of them present. So there was easy to have a command structure. All of the top security personnel were present during that incident. And so it was easy, especially so when we have the leeway to use later force, because the officers, corrections officers are not armed, unfortunately. We had to bring in men that were armed. And so there was one command structure for those that had the correct implements to bring the riot under control were allowed to do so.
So who was in control? Who was
Everybody was in control. The officers was playing their part, the OSD playing their own part, the military was playing their own part. So it was a joint effort.
So the rejoinder questions could wait. It's dealing with a set of questions already on menu. Please.
right. We can take the next set of questions.
My question.
Yes, okay. And what was your question again?
Leone has put that external forces came into the prison to like rescue the situation. What was their role?
So the question is, did you get external support to put down the riot? If A, what was their role?
Yes.
If I got it right?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, can you respond to that before we take the next set of questions?
Yes. Since the security sector approached to that incident, we had external forces because, like I said, the corrections officers who are not armed, we are not armed even as I speak. We have armed, or the armed military personnel who were already deployed at that center.
Okay.
So eventually they took command of the situation because, like I said, it was the joint security approach to the whole incident.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Yes. That's right.
Did I hear where will the prison be relocated to? And that was the last one.
Well, Songo has been identified.
How many acres are we talking about, and what's where?
88 hectares. 88 hectares of land has been, and surveys have been done. The landowning families are giving their consent, so we're waiting for the COVID-19 to subside so that we go into action. In fact, before now, if not been for the COVID, interest groups would have been in country before now, but for the COVID, we're reliably informed probably when soon airlines resume normal operations, we'll have interest groups coming in to look at that.
Interest groups.
To do the reconstruction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. The guy from AYB.
Yeah, I'm Leone from AYB. Was the riot in any way connected to the release of high-profile inmates? And also, I just want to get the exact number of inmates that died.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
I was trying to say, representing Premium News. I just want to know whether the inmates are armed with guns during the riot.
Okay. Do you have further questions for them? Let me take it from the last. Yes.
Yes, I'm Leone from Elephant Newspaper. I want to know, DG, why the provision of CCTV camera at this moment?
Sorry, say that again.
I want to know why the provision of the CCTV camera just at this moment. Why?
Okay, did you get that, DG? Okay, so do you have more questions? All right.
Mohammed Kone again. From what we had just after the attempted raid, there are also warnings that almost all of the blocks were damaged, and you've been informed severally. Why didn't you take measures to put the locks in place?
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. DJ, hand over the microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe I want to plead with the AYB person to give me the second question. The first one, inmates. The crime, like I have mentioned, has positive factors. For instance, the restrictions imposed on the inmate, movement of inmates, family visits, closure of court sessions, and the idea that father was a COVID inmate, all of this mounted tension. And because the inmates too had access to phones that we cannot hide, it is all over the world. Inmates can have the ability to smuggle phones no matter how sophisticated that facility is. I have witnessed prohibited items in a correctional facility, prison in England, where you have mobile phones displayed as being prohibited items covered here, is covered from inmates. So all of these put together, perhaps the inmates hijacked that situation, because if I give you statistics of the inmates that actually got involved in this, good number of serving murder sentences, rape, sexual penetration, all of these robbery with aggravation. All of these are the type of people that actually participated in that trial that day. So you can imagine that it may not probably be meant to release any image, because at the end of it all, no image escaped. Even the high-profile images were safely relocated to another place. And as I speak, those that should be in detention are still in detention. So I'm not sure. I don't want to give you yes or no answer whether this was meant to free particular set of images. No. And the images do not have any guns. All the investigation conducted so far has not proven that. So there was no guns discovered after the incident. There were no guns discovered. So in other words, there are no guns in possession of inmates. And why the CCTV now? Because after that assessment, mind you, I have said government had intended to relocate that facility, and plans are well underway to doing that. But we had to reach that conclusion because rumor was rife, or the intelligence that was permeating around the intelligence community or the social media posts indicated that persons were planning to break into the facility or set the place alight. So we had not anticipated that it was going to happen so soon, because this was a decision that was reached, and the request communicated for executive clearance 2 days to the riot. So there was nothing wrong to have put that in place had the riot not happened, even though plans were underway to relocate the facility elsewhere. And the warning about locks, no, I can't say the locks were damaged. It is during the course, like if you listen well during my presentation, I said when the image broke out through that chicken wire mesh, they came down, went to the workshops. This is an old building, mind you. This was built in 1914, and no rehabilitation was done on that. So they easily gained access, lay hands on heavy weapons, tools, hammers, big hammers, and they destroyed all of the locks. So we had no pre-warning, or there was no damage to the locks before the day. That is foolhardy, in fact, to really cells open when you know the locks are not
All right.
good.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll now take the final set of questions. Yes, let's start on this side.
Someone was asking the amount of people that died.
We'll come back to that. Let's just. So,
There's still one question that was unanswered.
yeah, so you answer them with this last set of questions. I mean, the amount of people that died, right? Okay, you answer that first, and then you take these other questions. Yes, sir.
Some part times itself. Mr. DG, you just admitted some few minutes or seconds ago that the inmates were not armed with guns. And I hope you're aware that internationally you return force that is commensurate to the force that your assailants have. Will you say, by hindsight, in this situation, that the force used on that particular day on the inmate was commensurate to the force they were posing against the officers?
All right. Thank you very much. Yes.
From Satellite Newspaper. Mr. DG, was the 5 senior officers sent last week on early retirement connected with the attempted prison rape? Because they have more than 5 years remaining to their service, but they were sent on early retirement last week.
Thank you very much. Yes. Samba.
Yeah, Kasamba News. Mr. DJ, this area is well experienced area. We are even there is more sophisticated intelligent materials are there to prevent people smuggling for items into prison. But yes, it happens. But before this time right now, we have had cannabis sativa, cocaine, mobile phones, and other harmful items are smuggled into prison here. Can you tell us who are responsible for this?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Samba. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Go ahead. And then we'll have one more and then wrap. Yes.
Mr. DG, since there was not a clear-cut command structure, who takes responsibility of what happens that day?
Okay, thank you. There's one more here. I think that's the final question today.
Mohammed Fofana, Global Times. DJ, just need the percentage of overcrowding at the correctional service.
400%.
Okay, that's the answer. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. DG. Over to you, sir.
Thank you.
In my report, I did submit that there were 31 officer, 2 died of illnesses, 12 died of gunshot wounds.
Can the pathologist help you?
Yes, and 16 of blunt force injuries.
That's correct.
And to say, senior, no, use of force, was that whether the use of force was commensurate, proportionate or commensurate? Yes, the response is yes, because mind you, an officer had already died, and officers were held hostage, and that portion of the facility had been set ablaze. Let's imagine, God forbid, the main building at the Pademba, the administrative building, had caught fire. The whole Pademba road would have been engulfed. So, if officer had died, officers are held hostage, 34 of them wounded already. And what force could we have waited for the people to come to break through? Let's imagine 5 of those murderers or sexual penetration people had escaped outside. You could not have had a good sleep that night. So it was proportionate. The force use was proportionate. The senior officer said to me, this is for the Sierra Leone Correctional and Service Council. This is not new in the past, nor in the present, nor in the future. Officers are always sent on leave when the government deems so. Your information, in fact, is not correct because a good number of the people that have proceeded on leave are retiring in 2021. So it's not 5 years like you mentioned, but that's your information. Thank you. Experience in England, because I have said where there are more sophistication, we have image smuggling items. Where you have CCTV cameras, you have knife adopts, you have body scanners all looking at security. People see smuggling. Why can't people be able, especially if you have saboteurs? Because we have had instances when even officers attempt to smuggle items into the facility for inmates. So it's not new in the case of Sierra Leone. Smuggling takes place everywhere in the world. In fact, if you go to YouTube, there are some institutions in Honduras where the inmates openly they video themselves. It is if you go to YouTube now, they video themselves, they organize boxing for themselves. You see they display the drugs in a gathering inside the facility. So it's not new. Who takes responsibility? I have mentioned more than once in this meeting that this was a joint command force. We have all the forces present, and the high command was present. So there was no, we don't have to crack our heads.
Leadership issues. It was clearly led, clearly defined, though multi-sectoral.
Yes.
So there was no leadership issues.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. We'll have in our midst the pathologist, Dr. Owis. Maybe he want to say 1 or 2 on the number of people that died. Also want.
From gunshot.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I'm used to standing teaching. I received our facility, Connaught Hospital Mortuary, where there is only one container, and we are struggling to survive. And but we were able to accommodate 31. And even this morning, brought some remains totally unconnected to it. So we always try hard to cope. And then the public also, don't forget, they come in just thick and fast. Everyday stab wounds, just for a cigarette and other things. And we have the cliques to face with, and which you all know. It just happened that I know more because I know where they live and who supports them. And those are the things. But on that particular day, as he has said, the inmates were brought in diverse ways. Some died in their cells. After the injury, some ran off to the cells and did not receive any treatment. You can make that out yourself, Mr. Connor. It's so easy. No one knows. And they died later and they were immediately brought to us. We accommodated them. So I had a total of 31, as we have said, 12 gunshot wounds. And even including the chap who was hospitalized at emergency and had amputation of his right leg because of gunshot wound. That was inclusive. And I did all the autopsies. And I've been doing autopsies for the past 37 years.
Much older than a whole lot of the journalists here.
Yes. And I'm proud to say that Sierra Leone must boast of one of the best forensic pathologists in the world. Properly trained, and if you could remember, the UNAMSIL period, the late Bakaba fetched the whole world, and he was lucky to find me in the Gambia. Brought him, me back. He was on that plane. He came and he said, look, you must help. UNAMSIL said they can provide logistics, but we need the expertise. That was how I came back. And since then I have not returned or taken anything. So 31 I did.
Okay.
Normally the people must be educated on one point. The pathologist, if he's alone, is given 2 months to carry such exercise. But because of the exigency and other things, I got up from my bed and carried out the postmortem with the help of the Ministry of Internal Affairs.
You mean your sick bed then?
Yeah, I was very ill from fatigue, malaria, with a frozen hand. But I came out, I was able. My minister was always there, brave enough to face all that things. I did it. It was exact 31 as is just indicated.
Right.
And the numbers are correct, and we were able today to bring.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Owis. Before we go, we have the Internal Affairs Minister here. Just give him a few seconds to say a few words.
Somebody's mic is on somewhere. This mic does not like internal affairs.
Go ahead.
Mr. Minister of Communications and Information, Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs, Fourth Estate, Civil Society DG, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for hosting us here today for this much needed press conference. I want to thank the DG for his putting the record straight. I want to thank the pathologist for leaving his sickbed and taking the time. We urged him because of time. We were urging him all the time. I was there with him to ensure that he was able to perform the autopsies that he had to. It's because he wanted to show you some of the pictures, and during this time it was videoed. The police were there, all the correctional facilities were there, CID, everybody was there to ensure detailed pictures, detailed videos were taken of each and every one of the autopsies done for record purposes. As we've mentioned, relatives have been asked to come and retrieve their family members. In some cases they've responded, in some cases we're still waiting, but we'll definitely give them a decent burial. It's an unfortunate event that happened, and one that we'll not like to see happening, and so we're putting in measures, stringent measures, and one of the things is there to move the facility. But before that, as the DJ said, we are putting in those recommendations that were suggested, in that we are having the security CCTV cameras, jammers, or some other security equipment that we're putting in there. The generators already there being installed. The fence is being relayed with more barbed wires and more other facilities. And we also have the military there to help with the security. And so we're doing things to enable us to ensure that we keep our inmates and have the use of a proper correctional services. We're there to correct them, not to ill-treat them. And so we're doing just that. I want to thank everybody for their help. My deputy has been very instrumental in ensuring. And so I just want to say thank you. We hope we've been accountable. We hope we've been open and questions have been asked. And we hope that we have satisfied the Fourth Estate in your presentations to the public. That will be what you've heard here, and not to spin it in any other way, but to say what has happened here, and the questions that you were given the opportunity to ask were answered. I want to thank you again. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll just hand over to Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister?
Yep.
Yes,
No,
over
just
to you.
close it.
All right, so let me add my voice to say thank you to you all, and should you have further questions, the DG is here, the minister is here, you can do follow-up questions with them in case you have further questions to ask. So thank you very much for your time.